One resident describes how electronics became an integral part of life in Alpha City. Quote, "A few years ago, a facility was built to produce simple electronic devices and components used for repairing and maintaining the extensive electronic equipment used on site. And as always, they opened this facility to residents for personal use. This has become tremendously popular. Everyone has electronic notebooks, laptop computers, and cell phones. These are automatically supplied to residents as personal necessities. Knowing something about electronics and electronic components has become as common as knowing how to read, write, or do basic math. Most everyone has enough knowledge to effect simple repairs, and those with a bit more ambition frequently implement innovations which are then shared by everyone. Computers, cell phones, and other common electronic devices are built and serviced right here on site. It has become part of the workforce's communication segment's function. A sort of small and unique technological boom is occurring right here in Alpha City." End quote. Another resident makes these observations. Quote, "Everyone comes here with the understanding that they are going to be part of the workforce. They will be participating in all of the different segments. There are no exceptions. We try to take advantage of each individual's unique skills by initially giving them prominent positions in the fields where they are strong, but they will still be required to rotate through the workforce cycle, participating with everyone else in the various tasks. Our assigned workforce duties only amount to maybe 20, 25 hours per week, sometimes less. Residents see the rotation system as a positive aspect of life here. We are respected for our various abilities, but are never confined and restricted to doing the same tasks day in and day out just because that happens to be our strength. People's strengths and preferences often change, and this system easily accommodates that without penalty. Adherence to speedy production and firm deadlines are not necessarily admired aspects of a workforce under this system. There is never the rushed, fast-paced, time is money, money is time philosophy and attitude as in the outside business world. That doesn't mean that things aren't done in a timely, efficient manner. It doesn't mean that there's never any sense of urgency. On the contrary, residents are very aware of things being done timely. It's just that the attitude is different. There's more tolerance. There's more concern that things are done right. Quality and personal safety are not just given lip service. The workers are the priority, not the products and/or the profit. There's always an assumption that our fellow workers are as committed as we are to doing a good job simply because of the underlying goals we all have in common. I don't know, it's hard to describe. It just seems that there's more trust in our fellow workers. There's a trust that they are responsible. We know they aren't simply there for a paycheck. So things get done and get done in a responsible way because that ultimately helps us all." End quote. Another resident tells us, quote, "It is satisfying in life to be able to experience a variety of different workforce tasks. If you've worked in the power segment, you not only have an appreciation for how that segment affects your life personally, but also how it affects the other segments, how they support each other and overlap. And this well-roundedness comes without the normal outside world detriments such as sacrificing cost-effectiveness, profit, and/or specialization. And yet the benefits are huge in terms of a versatile workforce and a self-reliant society. The workforce is never in a position where it is short workers, and we are never working a 40-hour week. In fact, in comparison to outside world standards, we have an overabundance of staffing. In this system, it's a huge advantage. Getting less hours is a good thing. I'm never concerned about inflation or company cuts or the price of gasoline. I have plenty of time to enjoy my hobbies and passions. Sometimes I even get bored with them. And believe it or not, the workforce serves as a nice break. That may sound crazy, but jobs here are not like most jobs in the outside world. You don't have bosses and supervisors standing over you all the time, cracking the whip, pushing for more productivity, for more and more profit, trying to squeeze every ounce of work out of you. We are all peers, and you are trusted and counted on to do your part. You are working with people, not for people. And the people you're working with are friends and neighbors, all on an equal footing, all working toward a common goal, which benefits all of us, not just some CEO's paycheck. And if you're doing something and you don't particularly enjoy it, you know it won't last forever, and soon you'll be rotated into something new. End quote. Another resident describes his experience. Quote, I'm constantly meeting new people and making new friends. At the moment, I'm involved in the transportation segment. I go in to work 4 or 5 times a week, anywhere from 4 to 8 hours depending on the need. For the most part, I actually enjoy the time spent working. It generally doesn't feel like work at all. When we build things, we try to build them to last forever. If it fails, we will be the ones repairing it or building a new one. The better and more durable we produce whatever we're working on, the less work for us in the long run. It's funny that even when not working, I tend to pay attention and notice things relating to the transportation system, or any area for that matter, that may be a potential problem or could use refinement and improvement. This isn't only true of me, but it seems to be true of every resident here. We have an eye for things in general which may enhance life in the complex. The fact that residents are, for all intents and purposes, guests as well, gives us the ability to see things from a patron's point of view. And we're continually interacting and mingling with the patrons, getting their input. And guests, believe it or not, are always asking about and interested in our lives as residents. They're always so curious. It's kind of flattering in a way. Everyone rides the public transportation everywhere. We do, however, have a fleet of private vehicles, which aren't really private at all. Any resident with a license can sign one out for free and use it as long as they need it or want it. So when a resident has some time off and wants to take a trip off-site, for example, they just sign out a vehicle and off they go. The workforce maintains all of the vehicles, and there's quite a variety to choose from depending on what you're using it for. They have passenger cars, vans, pickup trucks, motorcycles, motorbikes. Some have combustion engines, others are electric powered. The purchasing of gasoline is obviously the user's responsibility when traveling off-site, but the company starts them out with a full tank for free. That seems to be an overall theme to this whole cooperatism philosophy. The aggregate group provides and maintains the means for each individual to enjoy the free, personal use of, not necessarily ownership of, but personal use of, the tools, resources, and products needed and desired for the enjoyment of and personal fulfillment of the individual. As the name implies, it's a cooperative effort. In a non-ownership society such as this, the supply of the tools more closely parallels the actual use of the tools. And no one suffers for this. The supply is such that I always have access to whatever I need. If the demand at any given time for using a particular tool rises, then more are produced. End quote. Irene Engels, an Alpha City resident, wrote this about ownership. Quote, when we think of the meaning of the verb to share, most of us think of it as a virtue. We think of it as a nice thing to do. If I have a hammer and you don't, but you have need of one, and I share my hammer with you, then both of us benefit from the existence of the hammer. When I need it, I use it. When you need it, you use it. I lose nothing by sharing it with you, but instead there is a group net gain. If I have an apple tree and you don't, and I share my apples with you, then both of us benefit from the existence of the apple tree. But there is another side to this. Sometimes we feel we do lose something in this exchange. If I lend my hammer, then maybe you won't return it in a timely manner, and therefore I won't have it at a time when I need it. Or maybe you'll misuse it and break it in some way, rendering it useless. So logically, we think, well, wouldn't it be better if we each had our own hammer? Then there's no need to share. No one is ever inconvenienced. Same with the apple tree. Maybe my plan was to use all the apples I don't eat to make apple sauce, which will then last me all year round until the next apple season. If I start sharing my apples with you, then I may end up leaving myself short for my plans. So in this case, logically, we start to learn that sharing is not always advantageous to both parties. In the process of sharing, I may lose something that I consider important to me. Again, the logical solution is for you to own your own hammer or plant your own apple tree. This solution pits the idea of fairness against sharing. It is fairer for both of us to each have our own possessions. No one finds themselves disadvantaged by the need of another. We all take care of our own needs, and that is fair. This seems particularly true when it costs us something to acquire the advantage. For example, if I made the hammer and it took me hours or days to build it, first finding the right materials, then grinding and sanding and shaping them just so, and finally assembling it into a finished product, then I feel I've invested time and effort into having the hammer. Or if I've purchased the hammer, then I've sacrificed the money that I've worked to earn in order to own the hammer. This hammer now represents more to me than just its use as a tool. Naturally, I may feel more possessive of this tool. I am going to take care not to lose this tool, not to use it in such a way that might damage it, and because of this, I may resent sharing it with you, as you had no part in the labor to attain this tool, and therefore I see you as benefiting far more than just from the use of it. You are also benefiting from the labor I performed to acquire it. And this doesn't seem fair. It's only fair if you somehow equally share in the means to acquire it. Then the sharing of it can be considered fair. And this holds true of the apple tree. If I acquire the seed and dug the hole and for years nurtured it and waited patiently for it to grow and bear fruit, and you didn't share in this with me, then for me to share its fruit with you may be considered kind, thoughtful, and a virtuous thing to do, but it certainly can't be considered fair. And most certainly, I may resent being told that it is something that I have to do or should do. So, although there is nothing wrong with sharing, and we all consider it generous and kind, and we respect and admire those who are fortunate enough to be able to do it freely and easily, many of us find it jarring against our idea of fairness and can't help but feel a little bit taken advantage of. In situations where, due to circumstances, someone else, through no fault of their own, finds themselves without the means to attain something they need, at least temporarily, most of us would share freely in order to help them out. This is true because most of us can picture ourselves a victim of some unfortunate circumstances and hope that someone else would be kind enough to help us out. What we resent is being expected to share with or help someone who is perfectly capable of providing for themselves. This not only doesn't seem fair, it seems foolish. And for most of us, being considered a fool is far worse fate than being considered selfish. Therefore, people began to favor the idea of trading over the idea of outright sharing. Sharing was still considered a virtue, but trading seemed the fairest thing to do. It protected people from being taken advantage of. I'll give you so many apples if you let me borrow your hammer. This was not merely just an exchange of apples for the use of a hammer, but also, at least subconsciously, a fair exchange of the time and effort that went into producing the items. And that aspect could then be factored into the trade until both parties were satisfied with what they were getting and giving. This was the essence of the barter system. It was based on the idea of fairness, not on the idea of sharing. And for it to work, it had to be clearly determined who possessed or owned what. There must be clear lines of demarcation and laws governing ownership. Things must be divided up and outrightly owned. Then fair exchanges could be made. These aspects of ownership and fairness then carried over into the money system when it began to emerge as a more efficient way of exchanging goods and services. And this is the legacy of centuries of generations. Children may be taught and/or forced to share when they are young, but this is completely contradicted by and ultimately usurped by the example of the adults in their lives who participate in a system that doesn't function by sharing. They learn that this may be a nice thing to do, but not necessarily a practical or fair thing to do. It is voluntary, not expected. They learn to determine what is in it for them, what they are getting out of the deal. They learn to determine if this is to their advantage or not. They see that money has more advantages than just giving you the ability to acquire goods. It gives you respect, prestige, power, status, friends, influence, and popularity. And the lack of money may strip you of all of these. A money system requires the implementation of the concept of legal ownership, and because of this, a great many complex laws are needed to govern the idea of ownership, not just of objects, but of ideas. And the concept of ownership naturally expands into ideas of possessiveness, a desire to solely possess some sort of product, object, or idea. A great deal of advertising successfully exploits this very desire. True sharing is still as much a virtue as it ever was, but the idea of ownership and possessiveness are far more routinely encouraged and accepted in a money-based society than in a system not based on money. In a non-money-based system, the idea of possessiveness and ownership are still present, but mostly in connection to personal artifacts. The tools, equipment, and resources needed to sustain a universal lifestyle are jointly produced and shared based on a need of usage. Therefore, the idea of sharing is more the norm and alleviates humanity in general from attempting to straddle this double standard which has been created by a money system. Fairness and sharing reside harmoniously under one roof again, under one common social system." End quote. This essay was widely read and received a great deal of attention worldwide. Another resident shares his experience of the extensive Alpha City computer network. Quote, "I'm currently assigned to the computer network division of the communications segment. We integrate the various resident stats into the scheduling matrix. This is certainly a key element. Every resident is on file along with their complete workforce history, including their skills, their preferences, and where they are experienced. This database is set up with algorithms and complex search capabilities to efficiently and quickly allow for the proper and fair scheduling of every Alpha City resident within the workforce. It handles vacations, sick leave, and appropriating the right number of personnel to the various sectors. It's the glue that keeps the entire workforce and society functioning efficiently. The online system is accessible to all the residents. Everyone can see everyone else's workforce history. SOPs and videos for all of the various workforce positions are accessible for viewing at any time, so residents can learn a little bit about a segment they may be new at or about to enter. There are also fields for awards, special recognitions, and achievements received, as well as any outstanding contributions they may have had. The system also hosts other features dealing with other aspects of life here, such as bulletin boards, blogs, and schedules of daily events. It really is the eyes and ears of the community." End quote. This last excerpt gives us a glimpse of how early computer technology played a vital role in maintaining and organizing the extensive data management of early cooperatism. One could make an argument that this jump would not have been possible or have been much more difficult to structure without these advanced information capabilities.